Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're going to explore an incredibly high-stakes, ongoing battle happening literally right over our heads. We're talking about the massive game of hide-and-seek between government secrecy and public satellite imagery. It is a wild world where mapping technology, state censorship, and everyday amateur sleuths all collide. Okay, let's just dive right into this. Do you actually have the power to spot classified military installations using just a standard web browser on your couch? I mean, for decades, the best mapping and imagery was highly classified. It was the exclusive playground of the military. But today, commercial satellites are capturing incredibly sharp, sub-meter resolution images of the Earth, and the landscape has completely shifted. So the big question is, can an everyday citizen actually find what a government is desperately trying to hide?
Well, according to Keith Masbach, who is a retired, high-ranking U.S. Army intelligence officer, the answer is a resounding yes. You don't need a top-secret clearance. You don't need a multi-million-dollar budget. The tools for discovery are right at our fingertips, thanks to services like Google Maps. But, and this is a big but, you still need to know exactly what you're looking for when you're staring at a giant, seamless map of the globe. Which brings us to Section 1, Spotting a Secret Base. So, how do you find a needle in a global haystack? Masbach actually outlines 5 visual clues that are absolute dead giveaways. First up, unnatural straight lines. Think about it. Perfectly straight lines are incredibly rare in nature, so they instantly signal human activity. Second, look for neat rows. Military bases are highly organized, equipment is parked in strict, perfect order. Third, spot the runways. They look a lot like large commercial airports, but usually smaller in total area, and crucially, they almost always have a backup runway, just in case. Fourth, check the deep water. If you spot a massive vessel like the USS Ronald Reagan, bingo, you found a naval base. And finally, look for sprawling car parking lots. Modern Army bases are basically autonomous mini-cities with huge vehicle fleets. Moving on to Section 2, the cartography of censorship. Now, governments obviously don't just sit back and let their bases be mapped out by anyone with an internet connection. They use legislation to intentionally obscure what we can see from space. A really prime example of this is the 1997 Kyle-Bingaman Amendment, or the KBA. This piece of U.S. legislation mandates a 2-meter resolution cap on commercial satellite imagery of Israel and Palestine. Now, from a national security perspective, this is framed as a vital measure to protect Israeli assets from hostile observation. But from the other side, it's viewed as deliberate censorship. Why? Because a 2-meter resolution means anything smaller than 2 meters across simply becomes a blurry, useless pixel. And this is absolutely crucial to understand, because as organizations like the Palestinian Policy Network Al-Shabaka point out, this low-resolution baseline has severe consequences far beyond the military. When you intentionally degrade the imagery, subtler things like archaeological looting pits, environmental damage, or urban destruction become practically impossible to detect. It essentially creates a massive blind spot that severely hinders humanitarians and researchers who need clear data to document what's actually happening on the ground. Section 3. The counter-mapping movement. Okay, so what happens when citizens decide they've had enough and push back against these intentional blind spots? Well, you get a rising trend called countermapping. And this brings up a really fascinating academic concept originally coined by Guy Debord called spectacular secrecy. The idea here is that in modern society, secrecy isn't just quietly hidden away anymore. It's become part of the public spectacle. By trying so incredibly hard to hide these massive facilities behind fences and literal blurry pixels, governments are actually turning them into an everyday spectacle. The very act of hiding makes the revelation of those secrets irresistible to citizen watchdogs. And we can see this happening through a few completely different types of watchdogs who are turning the tools of surveillance right back onto the state. First, you have the Eyeballs series by John Young. He's an anti-secrecy activist who's mapped over 500 U.S. sites, completely driven by exposing what the powerful want hidden. Then over in the UK, there's Alan Turnbull with Secret Bases. He takes a totally different, more satirical hobbyist approach, using humor to map around 300 British military sites. And finally, John Pike's Public Eye takes a very serious global policy approach, mapping over 1,100 weapons facilities to inform the news cycle. 3 wildly different motivations, all using the exact same public satellite tools. And look, these citizen sleuths have a really good reason to be motivated. It is definitely not just paranoia. There's a long, documented history of cartographic deception. Get this, the UK's official ordnance survey used to literally draw fake farmers' fields or label highly sensitive military installations as just disused airfields on public maps. When everyday people realize the official map is lying to them, it fuels a huge desire to go out and find the visual truth for themselves.
Which brings us to Section 4, the satellite Streisand effect.
We have to talk about the ultimate irony in this whole cat and mouse game. You're probably familiar with the Streisand effect, right? Named after Barbra Streisand, who tried to sue to have a photo of her mansion removed from the internet, which of course only drew millions of eyeballs straight to it. It's the phenomenon where trying to censor or hide something accidentally puts a massive global spotlight right on it. And guess what? Digital mapping companies are absolutely not immune to this.
To put that into perspective, let's talk about the number 300. Recently, analysts at the Federation of American Scientists discovered over 300 distinct facilities across Israel and Turkey that were entirely blurred out by Yandex, which is Russia's premier mapping service. We aren't just talking about a slight dip in resolution here. Yandex dropped massive, obvious blurry patches directly over specific buildings.
And honestly, if you want to make an imagery analyst instantly curious, just boldly blur something out. By complying with these censorship requests, Yandex accidentally handed civilian analysts a literal treasure map. The analysts just took the blurry Yandex patches and matched them against uncensored Google Earth images. Boom. That method revealed the exact locations and perimeters of critical NATO facilities, like the Allied Land Command in Izmir, the Incirlik Air Base, which hosts U.S. nuclear bombs, and highly specific assets like Israeli Patriot missile batteries. The very attempt to hide them highlighted them perfectly.
And just to add a really fascinating geopolitical twist here, Yandex's blurring rules, they're highly selective. They didn't blur a single Russian nuclear facility, not one. On top of that, heavily contested regions like Crimea and the Donbass are shown in crystal clear high resolution, while almost the entire country of Syria, where Russia has major military operations, is rendered in a totally useless low-resolution blur. It is a stark reminder that the maps we rely on every day are often heavily curated through a deeply political lens.
So it all leaves us with this final provocation to think about. Between the incredible power of commercial satellites, a highly motivated network of civilian watchdogs all over the globe, and the inevitable backfire of the Streisand effect, in an age of open skies, is true secrecy even possible anymore? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes open out there, and we'll catch you next time.